In Tehran, the entire city suddenly lost power. The street lights went out, the traffic lights stopped, and the water pumps stopped working. In a city with more than 14 million people, everything suddenly went silent. In just a few seconds, both civilians and the Iranian military were affected. It was worse for the military because they suddenly lost communication and were thrown into extreme confusion. In the underground tunnels and bases, the situation became like a nightmare. There was no signal, no coordination, and no one knew what would happen next. At the same time, there were attacks that caused suspicion within their ranks, so there was fear that there might be enemies among them. But clearly, this was not just a simple glitch or accident. This was a sign that the fight had entered a new level. Iran has long had problems with electricity and water, and this is felt even more in Tehran. So instead of attacking bases that are hard to penetrate, the United States and Israel used a different strategy. They targeted the very source of electricity. But before we start, don't forget to like this video. It means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. On the night of March 29, 2026, the main power lines from Alborz province to Tehran were targeted. They used 150 aircraft and 120 guided weapons. But this wasn't just an ordinary bombing. They chose exactly what to hit: high voltage poles, transformer stations, and important power connections. They specifically targeted the Karaj area and several zones of the city, such as Zone 4, 7, 11, 13, and 14. Because of this, the entire area immediately experienced a blackout. The videos show that the explosions were not large. There were no deep craters. Instead, the most important parts of the power supply were hit precisely. This means the goal was not to destroy the entire city, but to stop its operations. According to the Iranian Ministry of Energy, the situation is under control, and only fragments from the explosion damaged the power lines. But in reality, what's happening in Tehran is worse than what they're saying, because a large part of the city is affected, remained without electricity for several hours, and the effects cascaded. Businesses stopped, ATMs and store payments didn't work, and people couldn't send money online. So it's like the flow of money in the whole city came to a halt. In tall buildings, the elevators stopped working. On the roads, the traffic lights malfunctioned. And it was even more dangerous because the big pumps that supply water stopped working too. That's why millions of people lost access to clean water in just a few hours. When you put all of these together, no electricity, no water, no money, and no clear news, fear and chaos can set in quickly. It got even worse because the internet was also down, so people couldn't get proper information and all sorts of rumors spread. But the ones most affected here were the Iranian military, especially the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. To the east of the city is the Parchin military complex. It's a large base buried underground where missiles are made. Its walls are thick and it looks very hard to penetrate from the outside. But it has one big weakness. It relies on electricity from above ground. When the power is cut, everything inside will stop. The lights will go out, ventilation will weaken, and communication will become difficult. In this situation, the place that once offered protection can become a trap, a large concrete space with no lights and no control. Because these underground shelters really rely on electricity to function properly. When the large ventilation systems that bring fresh air underground stop working, the oxygen level quickly drops and dangerous gases accumulate inside. In this situation, it becomes hard to breathe in just a short time. Air isn't the only problem. Continuous pumping is also needed to remove water from underground. When the power goes out, these will stop and there's a possibility that the tunnels will get flooded. At the same time, the supply of clean water for thousands of people inside is also lost. It's even more critical. The computers and radar used by the Iranian military require continuous electricity and cooling. These serve as the center of information and control. But when the power goes out, the cooling system will stop. When that happens, the equipment heats up quickly and can be damaged in just a short time. That means they suddenly lose their ability to see and respond. Now you might think there's a backup. It's true, there are generators and batteries inside, but that's not enough for long-term use. Facilities this large consume a huge amount of fuel. The generator's diesel runs out quickly, and to continue operations, fuel needs to be delivered. But in a situation where there's a threat from the enemy above, delivering fuel to the bases is dangerous. In other words, even if there's a backup, it's only temporary. If the power outage lasts longer, the entire operation will gradually stop until they lose the ability to function properly. This means that backup power isn't really meant to continue operations for a long time, but only to properly shut down equipment or provide temporary assistance. When the power lines are damaged, these facilities can only last for a few hours, but the impact goes even deeper. It's not just about the loss of electricity. The internet and communication were also cut off throughout Iran. Like a sudden cut, the flow of information was abruptly severed. The strength of a military depends on the speed of gathering information and the speed of giving orders. But when they no longer receive data from the radar and there is no proper communication between commanders, it's almost impossible to control the situation. At first glance, it seems like a simple attack on the power system. But in reality, it's a major move to destroy the enemy's confidence and control. Because the strength of a country also depends on the sense of security felt by its people and by its own leaders. And on March 29, 2026, that feeling was shattered in Tehran. The place they once thought was safe suddenly became vulnerable. Because of this, top leaders began to have doubts. And while this was happening, there were targets not only in Tehran. Even in Isfahan, some high-ranking figures were hit. One of them was Hassan Sardeh, who played an important role in security inside Tehran. Because of these consecutive incidents, especially in places they thought were safe, suspicions are growing that someone is helping the enemy from within. And that's what scares them even more, not just because of the attacks, but because they no longer know whom to trust. Because they can't determine where the information leaks are coming from, the leaders are starting to doubt their own people. The suspicion about who might be connected to the enemy is growing deeper. That's why communication between the commanders is gradually decreasing. In this kind of situation, fear takes hold of the enemy. And when fear prevails, the entire military's movements slow down. Instead of uniting against a common enemy, chaos breaks out within their ranks. There are even reports of punishing or killing their own personnel. Because of this, it's as if they're destroying their own organization, even without any direct attack from the outside. As time goes by, this further weakens their ability to make decisions and act properly. On the streets, it takes longer. The effects of this situation are felt even more. The security forces are already lacking in personnel, and their morale is also low. That's why they're forced to make unexpected decisions. There are reports that even children as young as 11 years old are being placed at checkpoints along with armed groups from Iraq. This shows how severe the lack of personnel is. When it reaches this point, it's no longer normal defense, but a clear sign of the system's weakness. On the streets as well, there are visible signs. The pickup trucks driving around while playing loud marches to make it look like the situation is still under control. But in reality, it has the opposite effect. It only further shows how weak their control over the people is. The more they try to display strength, the more their weakness becomes apparent. The problem isn't just within the country. Even outside, the problem is felt. In the midst of the crisis, the government is trying to divert attention through statements about the United States' planned ground invasion. But for many, this doesn't seem like a real plan. It just looks like a way to divert attention and buy time. Even the release of the 12-hour ultimatum for some seems more like a sign of desperation than a clear and firm decision. In modern warfare, the enemy is not attacked directly right away. They prefer to weaken it from within. They cut off the electricity, disrupt communications, and block movements so that those affected cannot respond properly. At the same time, there are places like abandoned universities that are actually being used by the military. And when these are hidden and used as shields, it only further erodes the trust of other countries. In this kind of situation, the government is gradually being cornered. It's not just the military that's affected, but also the economy and the daily lives of the people. It's not just a simple power line that was damaged, but also the trust of the people and the image of the government's strength that are affected. As time goes by, it's no longer just because of attacks from outside, but the weakening from within is getting faster. Simply put, when the leader, services, and support from other countries all have problems at the same time, the situation becomes dangerous. What's happening in Parchin isn't just any target, because it has a huge effect on the economy, on daily life, and on military operations. Tehran is not just the capital of Iran. It is the center of command and control. This is where decisions for different areas come from. The groups in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon rely on orders from here. But when the power goes out and communication weakens, the connection is cut off. They can't get new information and they don't know what to do next. They're left on their own. For the enemy, this is a big advantage because they can move more freely, while Iran's control outside the country weakens. In battle, the rule is simple. Whoever controls the air has the advantage. When the enemy's detection equipment loses power, especially those that consume a lot of energy like the ANTPY-2, they can no longer operate continuously, and sometimes their detection range even decreases. This means they notice fewer incoming threats. This is where the strategy called blindness comes in, where the enemy's ability to see is weakened first before attacking. Because their detection equipment is weak, it becomes easier for Israel's planes to fly over Tehran without being noticed right away. Even if the air defense isn't completely destroyed, the proper coordination between each unit is lost. Instead of a coordinated and organized defense, each unit starts acting on its own. Because of this, they can't make a quick and proper response, and most of the time, their reaction comes too late. You can see this in videos from the area, where the confusion on the streets is obvious and the security forces are struggling to control the situation. This is not just a problem within the country. Even Iran's allies in other places are starting to lose trust. When they see that Iran can't protect its own capital, they start to wonder how reliable it really is. Because of this, there's a possibility that they will look for other allies or other ways to protect themselves. Right now, Iran's connections to other places are gradually being cut off, except for a few countries like Qatar. Because of this, it's as if the whole country's ability to operate is gradually being restricted. They're not only having problems with electricity, but also with their relationships with other countries and their ability to communicate. What their enemies did is like a smart siege. They don't need to invade the whole country. Instead, they're weakening it from the inside until it collapses on its own. That's why the blackout on March 29, 2026 in Tehran wasn't just a simple power outage, but a clear sign that the way of fighting has changed. And this kind of attack became quieter but more effective. Instead of using sheer force, the coalition forces chose a smarter approach. They hit the very core of the country's operations: electricity, communication, and supply. So within just a few hours, the whole system was paralyzed. This shows how warfare has changed now, because it's not just the front lines that are targeted, but also the things that keep the entire military running, like electricity and connections. It's like a smart siege where you don't have to invade the whole country because you let it collapse from its own weaknesses. No matter how deep Iran's underground bunkers are, they still rely on electricity from above, and that's where they're most vulnerable. When that part is hit, it can be targeted again in the next attacks. The problem is, repairs might not be able to keep up with the speed of consecutive strikes. And when that happens, it's not just the power poles or lines that will go down, but the military's operations that rely on it could completely stop. But the effects of this kind of attack don't end there. The longer the power and communication outages last, the deeper the problems within the country become. It's not just services that are affected, but also people's trust and the leader's ability to make clear decisions. In this situation, every hour without information becomes a big problem. When things aren't clear, every move becomes more cautious. But in a fight, too much delay comes with a price. While one side hesitates, the enemy becomes freer to move and choose their next target. Little by little, proper coordination within the military is lost. Actions are no longer synchronized, and decisions are made individually. Because of this, the response slows down, and it becomes easier for the enemy to get through. At the same time, people also feel the effects in their daily lives. When there is no clear information, fear spreads quickly. When services are lacking, even simple tasks become more difficult. When all these happen at once, the country's problem gets even bigger. At this point, it's not just about the number of problems, but about how all of them affected the whole country at the same time. When communication breaks down, actions slow down. And when decisions are unclear, the whole country loses its direction. In this kind of situation, even if there are enough resources, they can't be used properly because actions are not coordinated. Instead of coordinated movement, actions become fragmented, and this is where the enemy finds an opportunity. While they are trying to fix the situation, they are not facing just one problem. These problems come all at once, so their attention is divided, and it takes longer to fix each one. Here you see the battle is about more than strength. It's about maintaining clear direction even when problems arise all at once. When a country loses its direction, no matter how strong it is, it struggles to act properly. In the end, it's not one big mistake that causes weakness, but many small problems happening at the same time and not being fixed right away. And when these are combined, that's when the gradual loss of control begins. While all of this is happening, there's another effect that isn't immediately noticed: fatigue. It's not just physical fatigue, but also mental exhaustion that makes it hard to think clearly. In the military, decisions are directly affected by fatigue. When you're lacking rest and problems come all at once, the chances of making mistakes are much higher. Even simple instructions can be misunderstood, and when that happens, it affects everything you do. As the situation drags on, the problems facing each unit grow worse. They're not only thinking about the enemy, but also the lack of supplies, broken communication, and unclear orders from above. In this situation, every move becomes slower and more cautious. But as one side slows down, the enemy gets a bigger chance to move faster and more strategically. This isn't just felt in the military. Even the people in the city are gradually getting tired. Energy and confidence are dropping. When the problem lasts long, the surroundings become quieter, people do less, and everyone becomes more careful with their decisions. As fatigue and problems worsen, it becomes harder to maintain stability. Even if some parts are still working, they're not as effective as before. This is where an important thing comes in: continuous action. It's not enough for it to work for just an hour. It needs to keep working continuously, even when there are problems. If this doesn't happen, the order of the whole country gradually falls apart. Not immediately, but slowly until the effect is felt in every action. In this kind of situation, you don't need a big attack to cause a huge effect. Sometimes continuous problems are enough to tire out the opponent and make it hard for them to keep up. While one side gets tired and slows down, the other just keeps moving smoothly. And in a fight, the one who keeps moving consistently has the advantage. You don't see it right away at the start, but as time goes on, the difference becomes clear. One side gradually falls into disorder, while the other remains in control of their movements. As the effects of this situation deepen, another problem gradually emerges: a chain reaction of effects. This isn't a one-time thing, it's a continuous interconnected problem. When one part stops, there's an immediate effect on the others. For example, when communication weakens, the connection between groups is affected. When the connection is disrupted, actions slow down. And when actions slow down, the enemy gets more opportunities. In this way, even a small problem at first can grow bigger over time. Not immediately, but gradually, until it is felt throughout the whole country. While they are trying to fix one problem, another one is already coming up. Because of this, they can no longer focus on just one issue. They are forced to divide their attention among many things, and this is where the situation becomes even more difficult. In this kind of situation, control is lost not because of one big defeat, but because of a series of small problems that are not immediately fixed. And when all of those are combined, that's when it becomes clear why it's harder to recover than to attack in this kind of situation. In this kind of situation, the ability to adapt quickly becomes important. While one side is struggling to keep up with consecutive problems, the opponent continues to adjust and change their actions based on what's happening. Because of this, the gap between them grows bigger. While one is busy fixing things, the other becomes more prepared for their next move. Along with the power outage, there's another silent battle, the battle for information. In this situation, what's important is not just what is really happening, but also what people believe. When clear news is lacking, rumors quickly take its place. Even a small story can grow and cause greater fear. Because of this, the situation becomes more chaotic, even if there hasn't been a new attack. In this kind of situation, the government struggles to control what people think. Even if there are official statements, people don't immediately believe them. This is because trust is lacking and the flow of information is weak. As confusion worsens, it becomes harder to maintain order in the city. Even a simple line for water or food can cause tension. And when fear is added to this, chaos spreads even faster. Its effects are not limited to the country itself. Other countries are also watching what's happening and are basing their actions on the information they see. When the situation looks chaotic, they become more cautious and may withdraw their support. In this way, even without direct conflict from outside, a country's position gradually weakens because of lost trust and an unclear public image. For the military, clear information is important for making the right decisions. But when mixed news comes in, it becomes harder to know which is true and which is not. Because of this, actions slow down because they need to verify the information before acting. But while they're doing that, the enemy gets ahead. In this kind of battle, it's not just weapons that are used, but also information. Whoever can control the story better has the bigger advantage. As time goes by, it becomes clearer that the battle isn't just reflected in bombs or missiles. It's also seen in how people's minds are affected and the way they view the situation. When people lose confidence, it becomes harder to maintain order in the whole country. And when leaders lose clear direction because of confusing information, the whole country moves more slowly. In the end, information is an important part of the fight. It's not as loud as an attack, but its effect is significant in weakening a country. In this situation, even time becomes an enemy. The longer it takes to fix things, the bigger the impact of each problem becomes. And as it grows, it becomes harder to return to normal even after the attack is over. In the end, it's not just about strength or speed, it's about who has the advantage. Sometimes the ability to keep a clear mind and keep moving even when you're tired is the most important thing. When one side can no longer maintain that, that's when the gradual weakening begins, and it's hard to stop. When control is completely lost, that's when everything starts to give way.